guys? It's Friday, July 11th, 5:27 a.m. Central Time. Grain market's just a little bit lower this morning. Brian Split is here. Brian, you look tough today. Usually I say you look sharp. Today you look tough, dude.
Yeah, I mean, I've been angry lately.
Yeah, understandably so. We're going to start out with the drought monitor and weather today, and then we'll do the USDA preview.
So scattered rainfall across the Corn Belt last week helped improve drought conditions in western Missouri, southwest Iowa, and northern Minnesota. However, conditions deteriorated in Michigan and central and northern Illinois. Emerging drought concerns were also noted in western Ohio, southern Indiana, and northern Kentucky. In the High Plains, rainfall in northern areas contributed to improved drought conditions here in Nebraska. In contrast, drought intensified in northeast North Dakota, central South Dakota, and western Kansas. When we look at the percentage of U.S. areas experiencing drought, corn country 12%, soybeans 9%, winter wheat 26%, spring wheat 35%, and cattle country 16%.
I have a really cool chart from our friends at Crop Profit that I think we actually helped inspire them to create. But this is corn and soybean country drought, but it's broken down by like the degree of drought. So D4, which is your most severe degree of drought, D3 is your second most severe. There's almost no corn and soybean areas in D3 or D4, less than 1%. You go down to D2 and it's like 2 to 4%. And then you've got a little bit more that's like in a D1 or a D0, which is moderately dry to abnormally dry. So there's almost no drought, Brian. I mean, this is shaping up to be a really damn good growing season.
It is. And, when you think about the drought monitor and that portion of like northern Illinois that, has been one of the small areas of the country that does have a little bit more developed drought. Rain monitor here at the office, not that I grow any corn here in Barrington, Illinois, but there was 4 inches in the rain gauge this morning.
Really? So it was in the forecast. So you guys actually caught the rain.
Yeah.
It actually happened already.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this is just and that was kind of where I was going to go with some of this. Is that was one of the areas that people had mentioned, like northern Illinois is dry. How do you do a record national corn yield without northern Illinois? And if these rains fall as advertised, and some of them already have apparently, that argument's going to be a little bit tougher to make, right?
Yeah, I mean this is definitely a rain that we needed. And I think as a whole, is Illinois currently looking at a record crop? I think that's probably debatable. Did this rain help? Absolutely. But there's a really good looking crop nationwide. And, we've seen a lot of yield estimates recently that would suggest that is the case. And things can obviously go backwards over the next 30 to 45 days, depending on, weather moving forward. But as of right now, the crops as a whole look really, really good.
I don't do crop estimates or yield models. Do you have a yield prediction or thought that you'd like to share with the crowd? Or are you going to be a coward like me and just keep your mouth shut?
No, I'm probably a coward because I have no idea how do I handicap a nationwide crop, and I'm not even going to try. But what I do is I do tinker with different yield estimates in a balance sheet. And so, we had an FC Stone number, for example, earlier in the week, and 186.9 for corn. And so, I'll tinker around and say, okay, well, this is our perception of the old crop balance sheet as we move into this report later today, which, by the way, we feel that the overall old crop stocks come down about 25 million bushels.
We're going there next. Don't spoil it.
Okay. So, I just think if you plug in a 186.9, I don't know if it's as bearish as people really think it is, but we can get through that as we get deeper into the process.
Let me ask you this. You and I both don't want to throw out a yield projection, but what do you think the market is trading? What are traders trading? Given a decent corn price at 416 and what we know about the tightness in old crop, what's the market trading?
If I just had to throw like a number out right now, I would say probably like 183 to 184, 185, somewhere in that zone.
I think it's 187.
Okay.
It's a matter of opinion. Look at the 10-day forecast. Look at this. GFS looks the same. It's rain everywhere. It's not bullish.
No, it's not.
Sorry. sorry guys, I'm just telling you what the forecast looks like, and the temperatures are going to be cool. I mean, this is like damn near ideal pollination weather. It's very good. You're gonna have to hope you're gonna have to hope to yield your way out of this mess the way that it looks right now.
Yeah, the one thing that we were like kind of worried about a little bit was with some of the heat that we had, late June, early July. There was a lot of pretty high overnight temperatures where it was like, oh, we're only getting down to 74 or 76 degrees for our overnight lows. But that was prior to pollination, so I don't know if it's that big of a deal. If it was like that during pollination, I think it'd be more of a story. But then when we look at this type of, average to below average temperatures during pollination with all that rain, I just don't see that as threatening at all. But
I think my hope as it relates to the markets is that we price in or discount a very, very big crop very, very early, and that we post a very early, put it in quotes, harvest low, like sometime in July or August. I mean, last year we posted a low in August. I mean, that was the big low.
August 26th, I think it was. And this was a really weird year for a high, right? A February high. So making a low at a strange time of year would also make sense. I would love to see a July low. I think there's reasons to see a July low. And if you're right, and we are pricing in a 187 currently, then we probably will make a July low. And if the low isn't in July and it's in August, I don't think it's going to be by a whole lot more as far as price goes.
I just feel like the market's trading about as big of a yield as it could possibly be trading, and that maybe the expectations only get worse. I don't know. I could be wrong. Let's go to USDA.
So as you mentioned, USDA will release its monthly crop production and WASDE report here this morning at 11 Central Time. USDA very rarely changes its corn and soybean yield estimates in July. Traders are likely to be focused on the demand side of the U.S. balance sheets. The pace of corn exports likely warrants an upward revision to the old crop corn export projection. However, some might argue that any such revision could be offset by a lower feed demand number. Changes are also likely on the global balance sheets.
USDA typically does not change the yield numbers in July. So if you see unchanged yield numbers today, guys, that's not bullish. It's not bearish. The trade is aware of USDA's methodology. Brian, what are you looking for here?
So we've got internally increase of corn for export by 50 million bushels, offset part of that with feed residual down 25. I think moving forward, we will see more corn for export than that 50 million bushels. I mean, geez, we just had a little over 1.2 million tons sold for the week last week that we had on the weekly sales data yesterday. So, probably it'll end up being closer to 100 million bushels, big picture, maybe. So I think for today, we've got a 134 as far as our old crop carry out. Then that reduces the new crop carry out by the same 25 million bushels. And then when we then move forward to doing what the USDA showed us on the June report, harvested acres for corn down 600,000. So that gave us a new crop corn ending stock number of 1.616.
Mm-hmm. And that's sticking with a 181 yield, though, which
it's with a 181. And yes,
go ahead.
We are in the mindset that, the USDA sticks to behavior where generally in increasing yield environment, they wait till August. If there's a reason to decrease yield in July, then they will, and that's going to be based on lack of precip in the month of June, or that might be based on, something like flooding after planting. But as far as, I think last time they raised yield in July was like 2003. So it's really, it's not something they like to do.
Maybe non-related. I wanted to show you a corn chart and a soybean chart and get your thoughts. So December corn posted fresh life of contract lows on Wednesday, and we bounced back just a few cents. But this just looks like a drift into the abyss here.
Yeah, so when I was with Mackenzie there on Wednesday morning and we looked at this chart, and there's kind of two distinct head and shoulder patterns within this chart. One of those, Mackenzie, we talked about, had an objective down at 412, which that has been met. And then the larger picture head and shoulder pattern would be where that high in April would be the head of the pattern. You've got kind of left shoulder in March, right shoulder in May. And then that measurement gives you a downside objective like 399.5. So we're talking, another 12.5 cents lower from there. And then when you think about the gap above the market, if we could get something somewhat positive where the new crop balance sheet doesn't look really that bearish here, especially if there's a decent old crop revision. That gap is up there. That gap is right against that old shelf, that whole 428 to 434 zone. And then that's about where that downtrend is going to come in as we progress a little bit later into the month, mid to late month. So I think, with one major objective around 412 hit, if we can get a little bit of a short covering bounce, that gap fill, that old shelf around that 28 to 34 area is a very likely target. And that would coincide with the downtrend, and we'll see if that downtrend sticks again. But I think that yellow line, you could probably just drag that right across to the April high. The line's going to be about the same.
Yeah.
So we've got multiple points of contact. It's a very strong trend down.
Knowing what you know about the fundamentals, the tight old crop situation, the possibilities with regard to new crop, do you feel like corn prices jive with the fundamentals, or are we underpriced? A lot of people think we're underpriced.
I think if we kind of walk through the balance sheet big picture of like how I feel about it, and use that 1.34 carry in, take the harvested down, start with a 1.616 on new crop. This is only the second WASDE report since the May WASDE, right, which is our first new crop balance sheet. So I don't see USDA changing the demand on new crop for this. It's just too early in their process right now. So what I think moving forward is if we start to tinker with those yield numbers. And so think of it this way, Joe. Let's say the FC Stone number from their model is correct, and you'd mentioned 187 is possibly priced in. FC Stone's number is 186.9. Okay, if you plug that in, that increases production from that 1.616 carryout number. You go from like 15,711,000,000 up to 16,200,000,000 roughly, right? So it's an increase of like 500 million bushels. So then that would then take you to like a 2.128 type of a carryout. But then we know that just generally as production increases, there will be a demand offset, especially as prices are at lower levels. I think safely you could probably say maybe about a third of that is offset. So now, you're right back down to like a 1.97, 1.98 type of a number. I don't think you have to go a whole lot lower than we went last fall at that 385 December corn number, even with like a 187 type of a crop. I don't, that's why I said, I don't think 187 is as bearish as people might think it is.
Yeah. Here's soybeans. So you had this kind of downside breakout on what would have been Wednesday. And then we had a nice recovery off of some multi-month lows yesterday. Now you're kind of back to this like support shelf area, which used to be support, perhaps now resistance. What's a critical area for you here today?
Right where we are. I mean, one of the things we looked at Wednesday was that high in June would be potentially ahead. Then the peak that we just came from would be right shoulder. Then there's a high right on the other side of the head up at that 1060 area. That would be potentially left shoulder. All of that would measure down to 951. So there's going to be some speed bumps along the way. You've got that downtrend that comes across. It comes around 980. You've got some other lows at 971.25, and then the 961 contract low made in December. So these are all going to be little speed bumps potentially all the way down to that measurement. But there's got to be something here today to make this market want to regain price levels above that shelf. Let's call that shelf roughly this 1013.25 to 1015 zone. So I think we traded up to about 1017. That was the opening price 2 days ago. So we went and kind of rechecked the open of that bar. I think if you take a move above 1020, then we're probably going to go fill the gap. But if for some reason there's really nothing in this report to get the bean market excited, I think you gotta you close back below the 1010 level today, especially if it's sub $10, and that's probably where we're headed, is that 950 area. And just from a timing perspective, like corn held a shelf for a really long time, and then we got to a point where we started looking at the way weather looked in July as we started going towards pollination time frame, and we took that shelf out. So I think it's kind of the similar story here for soybeans. It's happening later, but the development period for soybeans is later than for corn. So I don't think it's a coincidence that now beans are starting to tinker with taking out their shelf in the month of July as we start looking at weather as we get to later July and early August.
Excellent analysis. All right, let's go to export sales.
U.S. corn export sales easily exceeded pre-report expectations last week. Net corn sales were reported at 50 million bushels. The print was up substantially compared to the previous week and up 70% from the prior 4-week average. Mexico was the largest corn buyer for the week. Net soybean sales were near the upper end of expectations at 18 million bushels. The print was up 9% from the previous week and 43% from the prior 4-week average. Unknown destinations were the top buyer. Net wheat sales were also near the upper end of expectations at 21 million bushels. The print was down 3% from the previous week, but up 37% from the prior 4-week average. South Korea was the largest wheat buyer for the week.
You got to email or you got to call your senator if they don't raise the export forecast for corn today, because there's clearly a collusion, right? I mean, they have to come up. Look at this. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, we're this late in the marketing year, and we're doing over 1 million tons of corn. I mean, that bean number, we shouldn't be selling
No.
500,000 tons of beans in
No.
mid-July of old crop. So, and mind you, it was roughly this time a year ago that China began their new crop soybean program. So
Yeah.
that was part of like the bearish narrative a year ago, is like China has no new crop book. They're not buying beans. And then in mid-July, they started that program. So the question I have that I don't know is, we did have a larger Brazilian soybean crop this year than a year ago by, probably 14, 15 million tons. Does that get them to where they don't need to start their buying program now until like September? Does it buy them an extra 2 months of time before they have to start? But I think we're in that time frame where they should start to get a little more active for new crop. But these are very good old crop sales for corn and beans.
Here's the seasonal corn export chart. It looks very likely or probable to me that we end up with a record book of exports before it's over. It's like that's where we're headed.
Absolutely, and Mexico has been a major portion of all the buying that we've seen for this particular marketing year. And Mexico's had droughts, right? Now, part of this too is when you've got feeders being held in Mexico because the border's closed, right? They need more corn to feed them there. So it's the same animal. So that probably reduces our feed residual, because instead of feeding them here, we're feeding them there. So the export number might look good, where the feed number might look not as good moving forward, but at least from the Mexico perspective. But they've had droughts in Mexico also for the last several years. And I think there's maybe been some slight improvement, but that drought last year really led to all of the buying that we saw through the course of the marketing year from them.
All right. CONAB was out yesterday.
Yep, and the agency is forecasting a record Brazilian corn crop. The agency estimates this season's total corn production at 132 million metric tons, a 2.9% increase from last month's forecast and 10% higher than its initial projection back in October. If realized, the crop would be 14.3% larger than last season. The surge in production is largely attributed to a stronger second corn crop, which is expected to increase by 16%. CONAB also raised its corn export forecast to 36 million metric tons, up nearly 6% from last month's estimate. Meanwhile, the agency slightly reduced its soybean outlook, pegging the crop at 169.5 million metric tons. Still, that would be 14.7% larger than last season.
Despite this monster Brazilian corn crop, my understanding is that U.S. corn is still competitive, and the export sales would speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, so there's a lot of beans and there's a lot of corn in the country of Brazil right now, and the ports I just don't think allow for a ton of corn to leave, as they still have a soybean export program going. So that's maybe something that's going to continue to keep corn exports out of the U.S. going here, but. I think it's fascinating. You talked about that soybean, at 169.5 from CONAB. USDA started at 169 for their Brazil estimate, and they have been there.
Never moved
from the start, right?
I guess they were right or close.
Yeah. And so another thing for corn, and maybe why we could kind of make a weird low, and when I say weird, just not the timing that we're used to. What could it be in July? That harvest in Brazil for safrinha is running a little behind schedule, but we're probably going to be 50% through harvest down there as we progress into next week. And so do we need to make maybe a harvest low for the safrinha crop? And then think about, we're essentially pricing in a huge safrinha crop and then really ramping up our ideas of how big the domestic crop could be simultaneously.
Yeah.
So we're really, big crop South America, big crop North America. So both hemispheres, the crop size is growing on the balance sheets at the same time. And then I think maybe you get a harvest low here in Safrina, and we overdo the idea of the domestic crop and potentially make a low here in the short term.
Yep. We hope that's the optimistic view right now, is that the low comes sooner rather than later. Let's go to the screwworm story. We've got another one.
So Mexican feeder cattle imports have been suspended once again. On Wednesday, USDA Secretary Brooke Rollins announced the closure after a new case of New World screwworm was reported just 370 miles south of the U.S. border. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum called the move an overreaction, insisting her government has the situation under control. In May, authorities closed the border after discovering the pest was about 700 miles south of the U.S. border. The USDA has been working closely with Mexican officials to contain the outbreak and had only resumed imports on Monday at a port in Arizona, with plans to reopen additional ports in the coming weeks. Through April, Mexican feeder cattle imports totaled 193,000 head, down nearly 60% from last year.
Mackenzie, what are your thoughts on this? Is there anything political here? Is this all because this is just concern about the screwworm? I mean, is there any underlying factors that the people should be aware of?
I think it might be partially political. However, I also think that this is a big deal for our domestic cattle herd.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people say, well, as long as, I believe it's if you have your cattle wormed, you're fine, then the screwworm isn't an issue. And that's fair to say, but not everyone will do that. And then if it does get into our herd somehow, it could be incredibly detrimental. And then also you have to remember, public perception is huge when it comes to beef demand. So if we get that here in our herd, I have no doubt that it would hurt beef demand. So that in itself is enough to be worried. And yeah, it has hurt the fact that we don't have as many feeder cattle here. And feeders in the South, I know, they rely on those Mexican feeder cattle. But when it comes to protecting our domestic herd, I'm all about closing the border.
So if you were Ag Secretary Johnston, you'd close the border.
I'd close it and I'd keep it closed. And that's my next thing. Quit opening it and reopening it.
Yeah.
It opens the door for the market to have like more volatility than we already have. So close it until it's taken care of, and then we can move forward.
Okay, so feeders rallied on this, I think, initially yesterday, but then you backed off quite a bit. Is it you call that a reversal, Brian? It's not a key reversal. I mean, we closed off of the highs.
Yeah, not a key reversal at all. I mean, we didn't even trade below the previous day's lows, but we did open above the previous day's high. So that would have been the first condition, right? Open above the previous day's high, make a new contract high. Then you got to close below the previous day's low. So, I mean, yes, it was lower. It was off the highs, but we still settled like right at the previous session's high. So the live cattle looks a little bit different than the feeder cattle. Maybe not quite as good of a recovery off the lows as feeders. But here's something I think is just not cool, right? I mean, you think about that peak that we had in June, and then we break off of these highs, and then as we are making the lows, right, then we find out borders getting opened, and then you're like, oh, okay, borders getting open, that should be bearish, and then we rally after that, and then we make these highs, and then borders closing. It's like, oh, who knows this stuff ahead of time? Who knows? We need to sell this thing off $15 before the news happens, and then the news happens and then doesn't go any lower, and then they turn it the other way. And then you saw the same thing in the stock market last night before the additional tariffs were announced. NASDAQ, S&P start to sell off before 8 o'clock, 8:06 stuff's announced, and then you bottom right when the announcement's made, and then you start to recover. It's like there's definitely some people that are trading information before it is announced, and that's
100%.
Pretty frustrating to me.
100% with this tariff stuff. People, the insiders, they know. Flash sale.
Yep, we had one yesterday. U.S. exporters sold 4 million bushels of corn to unknown destinations for delivery during the next marketing year. New crop corn sales are off to a strong start, ranking as the third best since the 2021 season.
Before we get to, was it Hillary? Is Hillary trading cattle again, Brian? Is that who's doing it?
No, I think it's the current administration, and I think they're better at it than Hillary, if you ask me.
That's hard to do, man. But
yeah, I know, but it seems like their timing is pretty awesome lately.
All right, let's look at new crop corn export sales. We're like the third best of the last 10 years, and the years that were better than this year were 2016, and I think there was there was some strong buying that year, but 2021 and 2022, I have this labeled wrong, were very strong because of Chinese buying. So it's good. It's not as good as it could be, though.
Yeah, and it would really be really nice to see China, come to the table and make a deal. But my own feeling of that is if there's a deal with China, it's not because of President Trump. It's because prices are where China wants to make a deal. You think back to COVID. I don't think that we had the big trade deal because China was like, you know what, President Trump, let's come to the table and make a deal. I think it was because we had $3 corn and $9 beans, and China wanted to buy a lot of it.
It certainly was convenient. The stock market's getting beat up a little bit this morning. Is this on the Canada tariff announcement, I imagine?
I think that's definitely a big part of it. Absolutely.
Treasury's off. US dollar's up a little bit. Crude oil's up 40 cents. Guys, have a great weekend. Brian, thank you for joining us. We'll be back on Monday.